Sam Leavitt, Dylan Raiola, DJ Lagway, tons of names in the quarterback market already. Let's start to sift through it from the Missouri perspective.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And of course, it's not just about the quarterbacks. Reportedly, a huge name entering the transfer portal at the wide receiver position as well. Missouri certainly is looking for help there, but we're really going to focus on the quarterback position today, and including trying to figure out who the more realistic targets are, who the biggest dominoes, what the biggest domino type players that could fall, that could affect Missouri, of course. We're really early in the process, but with the portal opening Friday, really it's never too early. And by the way, it's never too early to start thinking about Rugiet. And if you've been thinking about taking the next step, well, now's the time. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. And you know what? Whenever Trinidad Chambliss, the current Ole Miss quarterback, whenever he's ready to make a decision on his future, you know what? That's going to affect Missouri and the rest of the college football world who is looking for a quarterback. And no, Trinidad Chambliss is not going to be the next quarterback at the University of Missouri. I think I can say that pretty confidently. In fact, it's got to be either Ole Miss or LSU next year for Chambliss. If, in fact, by the way, he has another year of college football, because I think a lot of people have taken this for granted. You see, Chambliss is going to have to fight for a sixth year of college football. He's hired an attorney, by the way, after sitting out all of 2022 with tonsillitis, by the way. So he's looking for a medical red shirt there. So, if Chambliss comes back to Ole Miss, well, that takes somebody off the table there. But LSU will be a massive player in this quarterback market, one way or the other. Certainly if they get Chambliss, a reunion there with obviously Lane Kiffin and his former quarterback could make a lot of sense. But if it's not Chambliss to LSU, then maybe LSU looks for somebody like Brendan Sorsby. My good buddy, the Scoutmaster, Brian Smith, over at the Portal podcast here on the Locked On Network, well, he thinks he's probably the best quarterback available realistically in the transfer portal market at this moment. And indeed, if Chambliss doesn't go there, well, I think Sorsby is a very realistic target for LSU, who probably has as much money to spend as anybody in the country, along with Texas Tech, by the way, another team that has, well, big pockets and big aspirations at the moment. Also, Indiana likely looking for another quarterback as well. Another, obviously, big-time playoff team. Fernando Mendoza likely off to the NFL. Sam Leavitt is another interesting guy on the market, formerly of Arizona State. You do wonder if his foot injury is going to be okay for the long term. Leavitt, formerly from the state of Oregon, you wonder if he might be heading back to his home state if Dante Moore, the Ducks quarterback, declares for the NFL draft. So really, Sorsby and Sam Leavitt I don't see as terribly realistic options for Missouri at this point. I think Leavitt may be more realistic than Sorsby in particular. It just seems like my instincts are telling me that Sorsby is going to go to the absolute elite of the elite in terms of money. Let's put it that way. I think Missouri is, a top 10, 15 maybe type of program in terms of just NIL resources. They're not in the top 3, and I think LSU and Texas Tech are probably in the top 3 right now in some order or another. And by the way, I keep talking about dominoes falling here. Well, how about Drew Mestemaker, the nation's leading passer at North Texas? Well, the question is, does he follow his former coach, Eric Morris, to Oklahoma State? If he does not, well, he's going to be a really interesting player on the market for just about anybody, Missouri included. Again, I keep talking about Texas Tech and LSU. The reason it's important to watch those teams, Ole Miss, Indiana. Well, if there's only so many musical chairs, in other words. It's almost good for Missouri if a bunch of these guys end up staying at their original spots. For example, if Chambliss stays at Ole Miss, if then Sorsby goes to LSU, eventually there's going to be some interesting names out there. And we're just about there, by the way. Guys like Josh Hoover. Hey, remember Chandler Morris? Well, of course you do. He was just the quarterback Missouri faced in the Gator Bowl for Virginia. Well, Josh Hoover actually replaced Chandler Morris at TCU in 2023. Now, he's a guy who maybe is a more realistic option for the Tigers. I will say this, though. He does have 33 interceptions and 9 lost fumbles during his time with the Horned Frogs. That doesn't really fit the Eli Drinkwitz mold. Now, some really interesting guys, I think Missouri fans have maybe learned to love to hate in particular. I think Dylan Raiola, the former Nebraska Cornhusker. I know the Kansas City Chiefs fans, like myself in particular, find Raiola's Patrick Mahomes impression to be, well, a little bit tiresome. But you have to say, a kid with 2 years remaining. I mean, Kirby Smart wanted him, for crying out loud, a former 5-star player out of high school who was committed to Georgia. Can Chip Lindsey get the most out of a highly talented player like Dylan Raiola? I think it's quite possible. I think if you're Missouri, you have to be open-minded about that possibility. And by the way, Raiola last season did suffer a broken fibula, which obviously not a fun injury to suffer, but long-term, and by long-term I mean for this upcoming fall of 2026, he should be fine for this upcoming season. Whereas I'd say another high upside play, DJ Lagway, formerly of the Florida Gators, plenty of downside along with upside with Lagway, in my humble opinion, because to me, his shoulder injury, frankly, ongoing shoulder injury that's never been surgically repaired or anything like that, is much more worrisome than, again, a broken bone in your leg. For as tough of an injury as that can be in the short term, long term, well, bones tend to, especially when you're 20 years old, they tend to grow back even stronger the second time around. So, and the thing is with DJ Lagway, for as talented as he is, similar, high school prospect profile to Raiola, excuse me, I always mess up that pronunciation, excuse me for that. But the thing with Lagway is it's not just the shoulder. He's suffered from a whole bunch of other injuries during his football career as well, just been frequently banged up with Florida, despite being 6'3", 247 pounds, kind of built like Cam Newton, but unfortunately seems to be put together a little bit more like Anthony Richardson injury-wise at this point, to make a analogy for another former Florida quarterback. But of course, I have a whole bunch of other names to talk about, including, well, a Harvard quarterback, yes, another Ole Miss quarterback, and some backups at some major institutions like Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, even South Carolina. Just a whole bunch of possibilities here, even more quarterbacks to sift through here on the program, coming up here in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about something that a lot of guys don't want to talk about, but they should. Stress from work, money, life. Well, it doesn't just switch off at night, and when it shows up at the worst possible time, well, that's where Rugiet Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rugiet Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment created to support both brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters, because it's not just a physical thing. Often it can be a psychosomatic thing as well. And with Rugiet Ready, well, most men are ready in about 15 minutes on average, so you can stay present, confident, and in control when the moment is right. And if you've been thinking about taking the next step, well, now's the time. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege. That is RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. And yes, even more names for you at the quarterback position. I hope you're taking notes out there, folks. But I brought up Trinidad Chambliss, of course, at the top of the show. Well, let's say Chambliss does return to Ole Miss. That almost certainly means that Austin Simmons, who was the presumed starter back in August and September for the Ole Miss Rebels, well, obviously if Chambliss returns, that means Austin Simmons is going to be on the market. And hey, if Lane Kiffin liked him, if that offensive staff down in Oxford liked him, that's a pretty good indication that Missouri should at least kick the tires. He'll be an interesting name to be certain. And indeed, if Chambliss goes to LSU, for example, maybe Ole Miss does bring Austin Simmons back. But Jaden Craig seems like somebody who is likely to head to the next level. And by the next level, I don't necessarily mean the NFL, although Jaden Craig, who is a member of the Harvard Crimson, believed to be the top NFL prospect at quarterback at the FCS level. Though that means he's probably, let's say, a 5th, 6th round pick, something like that. I think if I were Jaden Craig, I would want to have another year of experience, and also, a year of experience at, let's say, the SEC level, and he could obviously immensely move his stock up under the tutelage of somebody like Chip Lindsey, the new Missouri offensive coordinator. I think Jaden Craig could make a lot of sense for the Tigers, and I've heard there could be some mutual interest from Missouri's way. So Jaden Craig, again from Harvard, an interesting guy to keep your eyes on. Also, again, in the backup, there's 4 interesting backups, power 4 type of backups that I'm looking at who could be on the move. Somebody like Kenny Minchie at Notre Dame, who was in a pretty good offseason battle with C.J. Carr for the Fighting Irish this past offseason. Obviously, Carr had a nice season for Notre Dame, so perhaps Minchie's an interesting guy. We've seen Ohio State backups like Joe Burrow transfer elsewhere and end up being obviously excellent players. Maybe it's Lincoln Kienholz time. Obviously, another former high prospect there. Air Noland at South Carolina could be on the market with Lenore Sellers returning to Columbia, South Carolina. And then also Ethan Grunkemeyer, somebody that I know my colleague over with the Nittany Lions, Locked On Nittany Lions, Zach Sako, really likes a lot. And I thought Grunkemeyer looked solid after Drew Aller's injury. But if Rocco Becht, the Iowa State quarterback, if he decides to follow his coach, Matt Campbell, of course, formerly with Iowa State, now with Penn State, if Rocco Becht goes with Matt Campbell, that means Grunkemeyer is possibly on the market. So once again, Missouri, there's a non-zero chance that Missouri is looking at yet another Penn State backup quarterback potentially for the second year in a row. And there are a couple interesting names out there, of course, that I would put into the unlikely category for Missouri as well. One of them would be Rocco Becht, just because I assume if he goes into the portal, it's going to be to Penn State. I think that's a pretty safe assumption. And similarly, with Byram Brown, the USF quarterback, Alex Golish, his coach at UCF, now going to Auburn. I think with Brown going into the portal, seems almost inevitable that he'll be an Auburn Tiger, though I think Missouri would certainly be interested if that's not the case, but this does seem like one of those instances where Brown is likely following his former coach down on the plains. And I will just say this, something I've been thinking about with Eli Drinkwitz and the quarterback position. Clearly, Drinkwitz not put off by smaller quarterbacks. And obviously, as a Chase Daniel fan from back in the day, I was always kind of holding on to the belief that, you know what, a lack of size at that position is overrated. Well, I have to say, as time has gone along, I've started to realize that, having physical limitations at that position is a real problem, and often is. But you know what? It's a lot bigger of a deal at the NFL level, clearly, than college, as Chase Daniel, and Bryce Young would be able to tell you. But obviously, Drinkwitz not put off by the smaller quarterbacks as the recruitment of, for example, Tyler Macon and to a lesser extent, Drew Pine would let you know. And speaking of the Auburn Tigers, well, probably its best offensive player this past season, Cam Coleman, the wide receiver, has entered the transfer portal. And I'll say this, hey, if you're Missouri, obviously you want Cam Coleman. I think everybody in the country is probably going to be interested in Cam Coleman. Now, Missouri specifically has a major need at wide receiver, but even if you're a team that doesn't have a need at receiver, Coleman is such a talent that, again, if you're one of the big spenders, if you're Oregon, Texas Tech, LSU, then you should be looking to make Cam Coleman a serious offer. He is that much of a potential difference maker, in my humble opinion, by the way. And you know what? On the Gator Bowl, by the way, I will say this. One thing I didn't love about Missouri's play calling, it wasn't just the 4th and 2, scramble by Matt Zollers, but boy, the designed runs, at least one of which was an important spot that didn't get there. Just didn't understand that play calling, considering Zollers is not Bo Pribula. One thing, Bo Pribula is a strong runner and a physical runner, one who looks for contact, and makes more sense to run him in short yardage situations than Zollers. Though, of course, famously, Bo had a serious injury on said short yardage play at one point. And it was nice to see Jamal Roberts, I thought, in the kick return game. Missouri started, one reason they got off to a good start, that scripted drive got started with a solid kickoff return by Jamal Roberts. That was something new, and good to see Missouri trying to get a little bit more explosiveness in that part of the game in particular. Demarion Folks was solid down the stretch in that role, but that's one thing that Missouri has really struggled with in the last few years, is getting absolutely anything out of the kick return unit whatsoever. And you know what? Philosophically, for as much as I love the game of football, sometimes it can be absolutely brutal to watch, as well, seeing my favorite player of all time, Patrick Mahomes, crumble to the ground with a torn ACL and another torn knee ligament as well, an injury. You just immediately knew it was bad. And in 2024, similarly, when Connor Tollison went down with a knee injury, you knew it was bad. And Tollison's 2025 season is just a great example of, frankly, just how unfair and brutal this sport can be. So you know what? I'm going to get a little bit philosophical coming up on the program here in just a second, and also give Tollison a little bit of credit where I think credit is due. But you know what? First, before we get there, Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. An NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. The timing is perfect, right before the games, right before the weekend starts. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That is NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Well, medical advancements have come a long, long way in really just my lifetime. I mean, I remember my first real memories of Missouri football was the early 90s and the Bob Stull era. Obviously not a great era of Missouri football, to say the least, but I do remember at one point Michael Washington, Missouri running back, was a bit of a bright spot on some not so great Missouri teams. But unfortunately, I remember Washington suffering a serious knee injury during one of those games. And at the time, it just felt like, well, his career is probably over. He'll never be the same again. And yet now in 2025, and certainly for the last 10 plus years or so, now when somebody like Patrick Mahomes or Connor Tollison suffers a torn ACL or a similarly serious type of knee injury, well, fans kind of take it for granted and just say, well, he'll be back, no problem. Already with Mahomes, hey, he had the surgery a day or two after the injury happened, and fans are already counting down and saying, hey, 9 months, 10 months, that's possible he could be back for the start of next season. And indeed, that could happen with as aggressive and dedicated as I'm sure Mahomes is going to be to his recovery here. He could indeed be back for week 1 next year. That's a possibility. But it seems like a very remote possibility that Patrick Mahomes is going to be as good. I think he'll be much better in 27 than he is in 26, regardless, because even though guys come back, well, we've seen this time and time again, too. This is another pattern. Well, the pattern is obviously athletes are recovering much better than they used to from these types of injuries. But the other obvious pattern is that they're often much better in the second year removed from that injury than the first. So the point here in regards to Connor Tollison is, while he was obviously, it's impressive on him from a personal level, our training staff and everybody else that got him ready for this season, the fact is, I don't think he was as good as he was last season or in 2023, and understandably so. And while certainly I take all the offensive line grading in particular from Pro Football Focus and others, I take it with a grain of salt. He was consistently graded poorly this season. But you know what? Again, to expect him to come back from that injury in the SEC and expect him to be anywhere near 100% this season and to trust that knee and everything else, I just don't think that's fair or realistic. And the fact that Tollison even made an attempt and got through this season after recovering from, again, a late season knee injury, much like Mahomes suffered for the Chiefs this year, I mean, you got to give the guy a ton of credit. I mean, how many of us can honestly say we'd be tough enough to go through all of that to come back and play football once again? These guys are just made of something special. There is no doubt about that. Something a little bit unique. No question about that. And by the way, I brought up the Bob Stull era. I couldn't help but have a little bit of nostalgia for the Larry Smith era when the Virginia quarterback pulled out the pooch punt on 4th down. I haven't seen that by a Missouri player, I don't believe, since Corby Jones used to pull it out on occasion. Even on 3rd and long on occasion, Missouri would do that. I don't think the analytics community would love the trade-off there of punting on 3rd down, but I couldn't help but smile at that particular play a little bit. And you know what? Hopefully, I know it's been a rough stretch of Missouri basketball and football here. Hopefully this show has put at least a tiny smile on your face today for at least, thinking about the possibilities of having, yes, a poor man's Patrick Mahomes and Dylan Raiola being the next Missouri quarterback. If that doesn't put a smile on your face, I don't know what will. But you know what? Maybe being a part of the Everydayer program the Everydayer Club, I should say, will also put a smile on your face, along with the possibility of Dylan Raiola, of course. But hey, for $5 a month, $50 a year, you can get these shows for ad-free and also exclusive access to our Discord server as well. Check it out in the description of this podcast, or also just go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. And until next time, I am John Miller, and thanks as always for listening to Locked On Mizzou.